Relationship Wednesday, and welcome to the Bad Influence Podcast with yours truly, Jordan Banderas. Listen to what I must tell you today because this can save your relationship. The person who controls the money in a relationship and uses it to control the other person has already confused the relationship for a transaction. And I know I have done this in past relationships. So I know many of you listening to this have done it as well, because I have also seen it. Maybe once, maybe as a pattern, maybe in a way so subtle that you convince yourself it wasn't really what it was. The withheld access, the reminder of who earns more, the purchase approved or denied, the budget used as a boundary that only runs one direction. And it felt justified in the moment. It felt like leverage, like protection, like the natural expression of contribution giving you a say. But here's what it actually was: a declaration, not a spoken one, not a conscious one, but real nonetheless. The money becomes a mechanism for control in a relationship. The moment it gets used to reward compliance or punish independence, the relationship stops being a partnership and becomes something else entirely. Something that has a hierarchy in it. Something where one person's security is dependent on another person's approval. And that something, however it got justified, however reasonable it seemed in the heat of the moment, is not love. It is power dressed up as provision. You know I'm right. So be honest right now. Has there been a moment, recent or not, where money moved differently in your relationship based on conflict? Where access tightened when you were angry, where a purchase became a point of control rather than a shared decision, where the financial arrangement of the relationship got used to make a point that had nothing to do with finances. Because that moment, however small it seemed, left a mark. Not on the account balance, no, on the trust. Oh yeah, on the specific safety that a relationship is supposed to provide. The feeling that the person you chose is not also a threat to your stability. And your partner felt that mark even if neither of you named it directly. They felt the shift from partner to dependent, from chosen to manage, from love to leverage. And something in the relationship changed in that moment. Oh yes, it did. Something that doesn't get restored by the conflict ending or the access returning or the normal resuming. Because the normal that resumed was built on a foundation that now has a crack in it. And cracks that don't get examined don't heal. They spread slowly, silently, until the foundation that was supposed to hold everything cannot hold anything anymore. The weaponizing of money didn't start in this relationship. That needs to land before anything else. Because the person who uses financial control in a relationship didn't invent that behavior from nothing. It came from somewhere. Oh, yes, it did. It was modeled, or it was survival, or it was the only language of power that the environment around you ever spoke fluently. So let's trace it back. Because the pattern that has an origin and understanding the origin is not the same as excusing what it produced. It is simply the honest starting point for changing it. Think about the first place you learned that money meant power. Maybe it was a household where financial control was the primary mechanism of authority. where the person who earned determined the person who decided. Where purchases required approval and approval required behavior. Where love and financial access were tangled together in ways that made it impossible to separate one from the other. Ooh. And you watch that dynamic for years. You watch money function as both provision and punishment simultaneously. And the thing that kept the family intact, and the thing that kept individuals in line. And you absorb the template without being handed a single page of instruction. Because that's how family systems work. They don't teach, they demonstrate. And what got demonstrated repeatedly, consistently, across the formative years was that financial control is how you maintain position in a relationship. Or maybe the origin is different. Maybe you grew up in financial instability, in the specific anxiety of a household where money was scarce, and the scarcity created a constant low-grade tension that nobody fully named, but everyone fully felt. And you made a decision, quietly, before you had the language for it, that when you had money, you will never be in that position again. Never at the mercy of someone else's choices with it. Never without control over the thing that felt most directly connected to safety. And that decision was understandable. Yes, it was. It was the reasonable response of a person who experienced financial precariousness and decided to protect against it. The problem is the protection strategy transferred into a relationship where it doesn't belong. Where the person across from you is not a threat to your financial stability. They are your partner. And treating a partner with the strategies built for surviving scarcity is not protection. It is the importation of an old wound into a space that deserves something better. Because it does deserve something better. Or maybe the origin is more personal than either of those. Maybe someone close to you, a previous partner, someone you trusted, used your financial generosity against you. Took advantage of it, depleted it, left you feeling exposed and naive for having been open. And the wound that left installed a new operating system. Never again. Control the access, protect the resource. And the control that was meant to protect you from a specific past threat got carried forward into a current relationship that posed no such threat. Your current partner is not the person who hurt you, but they have been living inside the system built to protect you from that person. And that system, however justified it felt at its origin, is doing damage it was never intended to do. Here's what the conditioning feels like in the body, because you need to understand how this feels. There is a specific physical tightening that happens when financial decisions come up in the relationship. Probably you have felt this. A contraction that fires before reasoning has fully engaged. A pulling inward of resources, of access, of the openness that shared financial life requires. That happens automatically because the nervous system learned that money is where you are most vulnerable. And vulnerability requires protection. And protection looks like control. And control feels like safety, even when it is destroying the very thing that it was supposed to protect. That is the mechanism. And it runs faster than thought. Yes, it does. Which is why so many of the moments where money became a weapon didn't feel like a choice in the moment. They felt like a natural response to the situation. They felt like the reasonable behavior of someone protecting something that matters. But they weren't reasonable. Yeah, they weren't. They were automatic. And automatic responses built from old wounds don't care about the current relationship. No, they don't. They only care about the original threat. And the original threat is gone. What remains is the pattern. And the partner who has been absorbing its cause without fully understanding where it came from. The financial control lives in the body, not just in the dynamic, not just in the pattern, in the physical experience of being inside a relationship where money has been used as a mechanism of power. And both people are paying the physical cost of it. Yes. The one who wields the control and the one who absorbs it. Let's start with you. Feel what happens in your body when a financial conflict arises in the relationship. Because it will happen. The immediate contraction in the chest. The jaw that sets before a word has been spoken. The specific hardening that moves through the upper body when the territory of money gets entered. And the protective instinct fires. That hardening is not strength. That is a nervous system executing a threat response in a situation that contains a partner, not a predator. And the energy required to sustain the response, to maintain the guard, to monitor the access, to stay vigilant about the financial boundary, that energy has a cost. It costs you the ease that a relationship is supposed to provide. The specific relaxation of being with someone you trust completely, without monitoring, without vigilance, without the tightness that comes from protecting something you're afraid of losing. That ease is not available inside financial control, because control requires constant maintenance, and maintenance is exhausting in a way that only becomes visible when you stop doing it. I've been through this. Now, feel what your partner carries. Oh yeah, let's go that way now. On the other side of the financial control, in the body of the person who lives inside the dynamic, there is a specific physical experience that is worth sitting with. The stomach knot that forms before financial conversations. The shallow breathing of someone who has learned that certain topics carry unpredictable consequences. The specific tension of a person who cannot fully relax inside their own life because their access to the resources of that life is conditional. That is not a comfortable way to exist. That is survival mode inside a relationship. And survival mode in a relationship produces a body that is permanently braced. Permanently scanning for the next shift in access. Permanently calculating whether current behavior is within the acceptable range that keeps the financial stability intact. That is not partnership. That is hostage management with better furniture. You know I'm right. Think about the conversations that don't happen because of the financial dynamic. The needs your partner doesn't voice because voicing them requires financial negotiation that carries relational risk. The desires they've stopped expressing because desire became expensive in a way that had nothing to do with money. The version of themselves they've stopped bringing to the relationship because full selfhood requires a safety that conditional financial access never provides. All of that suppression lives somewhere. In the body, in the jaw, in the chest that doesn't fully expand. In the shoulders that carry the weight of needs that cannot be expressed freely. And you've been creating the conditions that produce that suppression. Yes, you have. Not because you wanted to suppress them. No. Because the pattern ran automatically and the cause show up in them. Now, think about the intimacy. Yeah, let's go that route. The specific quality of closeness available between two people when one person's security is dependent on another person's financial approval. Is there genuine warmth in that space? Or is there a transactional quality to even the tender moments? A subtle awareness on both sides that the relationship has a power structure embedded in it that affection cannot fully dissolve. That awareness lives in the body as a distance that physical closeness cannot close. Two people together, one person dependent, the dependency felt by both. And the intimacy that was supposed to be the heart of the relationship gets replaced by something more careful, more managed, more aware of the structure than either person wants to admit. Your body knows the difference between love that is free and love that has conditions embedded in it. And you know this is true. And it has been registering that difference every day. In the tension, in the distance, in the specific absence of the ease that should exist between two people who chose each other freely. Now let's hold the mirror up, all the way up. Because this is where we stop describing the pattern and start looking at what using money as a weapon is actually taking from the relationship you say you want to protect. Not eventually, already, in ways that are already visible if you're willing to look directly at them. Let's start with trust. Not the surface trust, the basic expectation that your partner won't betray you in obvious ways. I'm talking about the deeper trust. The trust that says, I am safe with this person in all the ways that safety matters. Financially safe, emotionally safe, safe to be fully myself without the cost of that selfhood being managed by someone else's control. Every time money moves as a mechanism of power, every time access tightened in response to conflict, that trust took a specific kind of damage. Not the dramatic damage of a single betrayal. The structural damage of a pattern. And structural damage is harder to repair than dramatic damage. Because dramatic damage has a moment you can point to. Yes, you can point to that moment. Structural damage is everywhere, embedded in the ordinary Tuesday, in the routine financial conversation, in the way your partner pauses before they ask for something they need. That pause tells you everything. The pause is the trust damage made visible. It is the physical evidence of a person who has learned that needing something carries risk in this relationship. And you created that pause, not through cruelty, through the pattern. Now, look at your partner's independence. Oh yeah, a lot of people don't like this, but yeah, look at that independence. Their specific sense of themselves as a person with agency, with the ability to make decisions about their own life without requiring permission from the financial structure of the relationship. What has the control done to that? Has it grown? Has it been supported? Has the relationship been a space where your partner's confidence in their own capacity expanded? Or has it contracted? Has the financial dynamic quietly communicated without a single explicit statement that their judgment, their desires, their independent decisions are subject to review? Because that communication happens without words. It happens through every transaction that required implicit approval. through every moment that access shifted based on relational temperature, through the gradual, invisible accumulation of experiences that taught your partner their financial security lives inside your mood. And a person whose security lives inside someone else's mood cannot fully develop, cannot take the risk that growth requires, cannot bring their full self to any pursuit because their full self is partially occupied with maintaining the conditions that kept the financial stability intact. You have been limiting someone you love. Not intentionally, because you're not an asshole, but actually. Now, look at what the dynamic is doing to you. Because control is not a neutral position. It has its own cost, paid by the person wielding it. The vigilance required to maintain financial control in a relationship is enormous. The monitoring, the tracking, the constant low-grade awareness of whether the balance of power is being maintained. That vigilance consumes energy that belongs to the relationship, to the building, to the shared life, to the version of partnership where both people are fully invested in the same direction rather than one person managing the other's position. And the relationship you're building inside that vigilance is smaller than what's possible. It's smaller than what you actually want. Because what you actually want, underneath the control, underneath the protection strategy, underneath the wound that made financial power feel necessary, is a partnership. A real one. Where both people are secure, where both people contribute, where money is a shared resource for a shared life rather than a mechanism of hierarchy. That relationship is not what you've been building. And somewhere inside you, in the quiet moments when the defense is down, you know it. Yes, you do. Now, look at the long-term trajectory, because financial control in a relationship doesn't stay static. It escalates or it ends. Either the control tightens as the partner becomes more dependent and the controlling person becomes more invested in maintaining the position, or the partner reaches a point where the cost of dependency becomes greater than the cost of leaving. And partners reach that point, not dramatically, not with a declaration, quietly, in the accumulation of 1,000 moments where they felt managed rather than loved. In the day they realize that the financial security the relationship provides has been purchased with a freedom they can no longer afford to keep paying for. And they leave. They get up and they leave. Not always physically, sometimes emotionally first. The withdrawal that arrives before the departure. The checking out that precedes the walking out. And you'll feel it. You may already be feeling it as a distance that opened without a single fight to explain it. A quietness where engagement used to be. A going through the motions quality to days that used to feel alive. That is not the relationship cooling naturally. No, it is not. That is a person who has been making peace with leaving while still physically present. And the financial control, the pattern that felt like protection, is what accelerated their departure. Now look at what you're betraying by continuing this pattern. Oh yeah, this is another episode where I drop bombs. So it's not just your partner, but yourself. The version of you that knows what real partnership looks like. That knows the difference between a relationship built on shared security and one built on managed dependency. That knows however quietly, however buried under the protection strategy, that love is not supposed to come with conditions attached to the bank account. That version of you is still in there, covered by the pattern, covered by the wound that produced it, covered by the years of conditioning that made financial control feel like the reasonable response to the fear underneath it, but still present. It's still sending the signal in the moments when the control produced compliance rather than connection, and the compliance felt hollow rather than satisfying. In the moments when you saw the pause before your partner asked for something and felt something that wasn't pride. That feeling was your own integrity telling you the truth. And the truth is this: the relationship you actually want cannot be built on the foundation this pattern has been laying. Sorry to break it to you, but that's the truth. Now, we build something real. Not a guilt trip with a resolution attached. A genuine standard. Because the pattern we just examined deserves a real answer, not a comfortable one. And the real answer, it starts with this: money is not power in a relationship. Money is a resource. And the difference between those two things, between treating shared finances as power and treating them as a resource, is the entire difference between a partnership and a hierarchy. Hierarchies can be maintained for a long time, but they cannot be loved inside of. Not fully, not freely, not in the ways that makes a relationship feel like the thing both people sign up for. And you want the thing both people sign up for. That's not a small want. No, it is not small. That is the whole point of choosing someone. Yes, it is. So let's talk about what the shift actually requires. Because it's not just a behavioral change. It's an identity change. The person who uses money as a weapon in a relationship has built a version of their identity around financial position, around being the one who provides, and therefore the one who decides, around contribution as the source of authority rather than love as the foundation of partnership. And dismantling that identity is harder than changing a behavior. Oh, yes, it is. Believe me, it took me a long time. Because the identity feels like it's protecting something real. The contribution, the effort, the sacrifices made to be in the financial position that the control draws from. Those things are real. The sacrifice was real. The effort was real. The provision was real. But real contribution does not purchase relational authority. It is not a down payment on the right to control. It is the expression of care. And care that comes with conditions attached is not care. It is investment with an expected return. And when the return gets demanded through financial control, when the contribution becomes leverage, it retroactively changes what the contribution was. It becomes a transaction dressed as love. And transactions don't build partnerships. No, they don't. They build resentment on both sides. In the person who feels control, and in the person whose genuine provision got converted into a mechanism of power. So, the shift starts with separating contribution from control. Completely. Yeah, completely. The providing stays. The sacrifice stays. The financial responsibility stays. What goes is the authority that got attached to it. The idea that earning more or earning at all gives you a say in how your partner moves through the world. Because guess what? It doesn't. It gives you shared resources and shared responsibility, not ownership of a person. Regardless of what the red pill says, that's not what happens. Now let's talk about what the new standard looks like in practice. Because standards without specifics are just intentions. The new standard is this. Money conversations in the relationship happen between two equal people with equal voices, regardless of who earns what. Financial decisions get made together, not announced by one person and endorsed by the other. Access to shared resources does not change based on relational conflict. Ever. Not as punishment, not as leverage, not as the sole reminder of who holds the financial position. The conflict and the finances stay in separate rooms because the moment they enter the same room, the moment money moves in response to a relational dynamic, the war has been declared. And you are done declaring that war. Not because you've been told to. Because you've looked at what it costs and decided the cost is too high. Now let's talk about the deeper work. Because the behavioral standard is necessary but not sufficient. It takes a lot of work. The wound underneath the control needs to be addressed directly. The fear of financial vulnerability that produced the control in the first place. The belief, absorbed from a specific history, that financial position equals safety and losing financial control equals exposure. That belief needs to be examined, traced back to its origin, held up to the light of the current relationship and asked honestly, does this apply here? Is this person actually a threat to your financial stability? Or have you been treating them like one because the original wound didn't come from them? Because if the answer is no, if your partner is not actually the threat the protection strategy is responding to, then the protection strategy is not protecting you. It is damaging the relationship to defend against a threat that no longer exists. And you are capable of making a different choice. Not a naive one, not one that ignores the legitimate importance of financial responsibility in a shared life. A conscious one that separates the real need for financial clarity and shared responsibility from the wound-driven need to control access as a mechanism of relational power. Those are not the same need, and they deserve completely different responses. Shared financial responsibility gets addressed through honest conversation, through agreed upon structures, through transparency that goes both directions, and decisions that get made together. The wound gets addressed by tracing it back to where it actually came from and deciding it no longer has the authority to run the relationship. Both of those things are your work to do. Not your partner's, yours. Because the pattern originated in you, regardless of where it came from before that. And the ending of it begins with you. And if this episode hits somewhere real, if something in here named the dynamic you've been inside and show you clearly what it's been costing, hit that subscribe button, because every single Wednesday we come back to this exact work. The work of becoming the kind of partner that love actually deserves. The work that looks honestly at the hardest part of how we show up in relationship and refuses to let us keep calling damage by a gentler name. This is not a podcast for people who want to feel good about their partner. This is a podcast for people who are ready to change them. Honestly, completely, starting with the next financial conversation they have with the person they chose. So think about your partner right now. The version of them that exists when financial safety is unconditional. When their access to the shared resources of the shared life doesn't depend on their behavior meeting your standard. Yeah, think about that. When they can make decisions about their own needs without calculating the relational cost of that decision. That version is freer, more present, more open, more fully themselves in the relationship. And that version, the free version of your partner, is the one you actually fell in love with. Not the managed version, not the carefully navigating version, the free one. Yeah, the free one. And freedom cannot exist inside financial control. It can only exist when the control is released, genuinely, completely, without the quiet reinstatement when conflict returns. Release as a standard, not as a gift, not as something that gets given and taken based on the relational temperature. As the permanent operating condition of the partnership. Because your partner's financial security inside this relationship is not a reward for good behavior. It is their right as your partner. And recognizing that, really recognizing it, not just intellectually, but in the decisions you make, is the beginning of building something that both of you can actually live inside freely. Think about what the relationship becomes when the financial dynamic reflects genuine partnership. When money conversations feel like two people solving a shared problem rather than one person managing another person's access. When the tension that has lived in the financial layer of the relationship finally releases. Because both people know that conflict will not change the terms of their shared security. When your partner can bring their full self to the relationship, including their financial self, their needs, their desires, without the calculation of whether those things are within the acceptable range. That relationship is not theoretical. It is the direct result of your choosing partnership over control, consistently, without the quiet reinstatement. Until the new standard becomes the only standard. And you are capable of that choice. Not because it's easy. Because you've already done harder things than this. You've built financial stability in conditions that require real sacrifice. Applying that same discipline to releasing the control that the stability became, that is the next level of the same work. Not softer work, different work. The work of becoming a partner whose financial strength is in service of the relationship rather than in control of it. That is the identity from this moment forward. Not the provider who decides, the partner who builds. Yes, not the one who controls access, the one who creates security, real security, unconditional security for the person they chose. Because real security in a relationship doesn't come from financial control. It comes from both people knowing in their bodies, not just their minds, that their place in this life is not contingent on anything other than the love that brought them here. That is what you sign up to provide when you chose this person. Yes, you sign up for that. Not manage access, unconditional security. And you have the capacity to give that. You always did. The wound just got there first and built something that looked like protection but functioned like a prison. And the prison ends Now, not gradually, not when it feels safe enough. Now. With the next financial conversation, the next moment of conflict, the next time the old signal fires and the control wants to engage. You choose partnership instead. Yeah, choose the partnership. And remember, just remember this. The choice is always yours.